The After the Affair podcast with me, Luke Shillings, is here to help you process, decide, and move forward on purpose following infidelity. Together, we'll explore what's required to rebuild trust not only in yourself, but also with others. Whether you stay or leave, I can help. And no matter what your story, there will be something here for you. Let's go. Hello, and welcome back to the After the Affair podcast. I'm your host, Luke Shillings, and today you're listening to episode number 188. As I started thinking about what to focus on for today's episode, I couldn't help but feel sad. Sad for all the people I know who are hurting right now. You might be one of those people. Knowing that choices made by others can indirectly create an enormous amount of hurt and discomfort in our world. And there's only so much responsibility that you or I can take for the impact that other people's behaviour has. When I think about traditional infidelity recovery advice, what it sounds like, and more importantly, how it can both strengthen and weaken your current state, I've been working on something recently that really got me thinking, and I wanted to share some of those thoughts with you. Because often, a lot of the advice that is out there is failing you. Let's think about the most common ones. Process your feelings. Now, of course, if you are equipped, skilled, and have spent years practicing how to manage your emotions and understand yourself deeply, that advice can be really useful. It would be great if everyone knew how to do that, though. The problem is most people don't. So instead, the idea of processing becomes something overwhelming, something that's just too hard. And what do we do when something feels too hard? We tend to default to rumination. The problem is, rumination makes things worse. It often leads to suffering, and that suffering is no longer about the other person's behaviour. It becomes about the internal discomfort that we create from our own thoughts, our own beliefs, and the stories that we keep replaying. So yes, processing your feelings is undoubtedly effective, but for many people, it simply isn't accessible. At least not on a level that feels capable of managing the depth of emotion that creates betrayal. The next one is to just communicate better. Again, on paper, that makes sense. The problem is, when your nervous system is spiking, when you are activated or elevated and emotionally flooded, the logic your brain offers in those moments is usually extreme. It becomes very binary, very black and white. The conversation either turns into a full explosive argument, or you shut down completely and withdraw. There's very little healthy communication happening here. And then the final one I hear all the time is this pressure around making a decision. That looming question in the background. Either it's coming from your own fear or from people around you. And the question is, are you staying or leaving? And honestly, this can be one of the most dangerous pieces of advice of all. Because the reality is, making a lifelong decision, or even a long-term decision of several years, from an emotional spike that has happened in a relatively short period of time, is dangerous. I've lost track of the number of people I've spoken to who have been given this advice by close friends, family members, and sometimes even professionals who are pushing a very specific agenda. The problem with all of this advice, process your feelings, communicate better, decide whether to stay or leave, is the impact it has on someone who is already exhausted. You are entering this work from a place of psychological, emotional, and often physical exhaustion. You're second-guessing every instinct. You're locked into a spiral that you didn't choose, and it feels incredibly difficult to interrupt or change it. And somewhere underneath all of that, you start believing the lie that this is just who you are now. But this isn't who you are. This is emotional activation. This is your system responding to pain. And once you understand the system, you can actually begin to interrupt it. So I want to walk you through some of the key things that I take all of my one-to-one clients through in the early stages of betrayal recovery, particularly when the emotional system has completely hijacked the logical brain. The first thing is recognizing that there are two active systems at play in the first place. we have an emotional system and we have a logical system. The majority of the work I do is helping people understand the relationship between those two things. The emotional system is fast, it's protective, it's always scanning for danger, it reacts quickly. The logical system is slower. It's considered, it's strategic, it evaluates, it plans, it looks at options before making decisions. But often, the logical system is still being driven by the emotional one. So even when the logical system comes up with something helpful, or at least seemingly so, something calm, rational, and meaningful, the emotional system can still be so powerful that it overrides it. It says things like, that's a stupid idea, or that won't work, or what if you're wrong? This isn't safe. And before long, you're in an internal battle, a battle between what feels safest and what is actually right. And let's remember, the reason you're questioning your own trust is because of a decision that somebody else made. Now all of a sudden, you're at war with yourself. Recognizing this is such an important step because it gives you some sense of control. I can't tell you how many times I've had people genuinely shocked by the idea that they could think and feel something different to what they are currently thinking and feeling. Even just knowing that possibility exists, even if it doesn't feel accessible yet, opens doors to things that weren't even visible before. The next part is understanding the emotional makeup of being human, the things that we experience, so sensations, feelings, and emotions. They are similar and they're connected, but recognizing the differences between them makes a huge difference. A sensation is a feeling in the body, often generated by the body. It's raw physical data. It usually happens before any story or narrative appears. It's often a message from the body to the brain, not the other way around. A feeling is your interpretation. It's the mind making meaning of a situation, and then that interpretation presents itself as a vibration in the body. It's that vibration in the body that we're referring to as the feeling that we then label as the emotion. This is the label that we apply to that feeling. For example, a feeling might be a tightness in the chest, pressure in the throat, a clenching of the jaw, tingling in your fingertips, a heaviness in your stomach. And then we label it. We apply the label, and that might be anxiety, sadness, fear, hurt, shame, self-doubt, resentment, or any number of other emotional experiences. And this is where I like to ask a simple question. If I asked you, point to you, where would you point? Would you point to your chest, your heart, your body, or would you point to your head? Maybe somewhere between your eyes, maybe just behind your forehead. There's no right answer here, and people genuinely locate their sense of self in different places. For me personally, I'm very much in my head. That's where I experience my sense of self. And if you're anything like me, it's worth noticing this. Your head only makes up the top sixth of your body. The rest is where you actually feel everything. So everything from neck down is where all of our emotional experience exists. It's not in your mind. And yet, we often walk around believing everything is only happening in our heads. But it isn't. So by accessing what you're feeling, putting language to it, and allowing it to exist without immediate judgment, you create space. And that brings us to the next part, the pattern most people live inside. There are essentially 5 key steps. There is an event, a trigger or circumstance. Something happens. That is followed very quickly by a thought. This is the interpretation. That thought then in turn creates a feeling. And that feeling drives behaviour. If you feel calm, grounded and secure, you're far more likely to behave in ways that align with the kind of person you want to be. But if you feel angry, disconnected, guilty, anxious, resentful or afraid, you are far more likely to choose behaviours that are reactive. Behaviours that move you further away from the person you want to be. And ultimately, those behaviours produce results, outcomes in your life. So we have trigger, thought, feeling, behaviour, result. And then back to trigger again. Because that result often creates the next trigger. And then the loop continues again and again. Most people are living inside this loop all the time without even realising it. So let's make it visible. Because the whole purpose here is awareness. The loops that happen in the middle of the night, the ones triggered when you come home and your partner's phone is face down on the kitchen counter, the delayed text reply, the missing kiss at the end of the message. These moments, which in reality might be insignificant, feel enormous, and they trigger the entire loop. That is what we need to learn to recognise. And then finally, we need to figure out a way at this stage, without overcomplicating things, to interrupt that loop. Because awareness on its own is powerful, but awareness without interruption can still leave you stuck. You can know exactly what's happening and still feel completely controlled by it. So this is where I introduce something very simple, not necessarily easy, but simple. And it's this: emotion, pause, choose. Most people live in a much faster version of that. It looks something more like this: emotion, reaction, behaviour, more pain. Something happens, you feel triggered, you react, you check the phone, you ask the question, you send the message, you shut down, you explode, you withdraw, you drink, you numb, you spiral. And then, because of the behaviour that followed the emotion, the situation often becomes worse. More distance, more conflict, more shame, more evidence for the story your brain is already telling you. And so the feeling gets reinforced. The anxiety grows, the fear grows, the resentment grows, and the cycle becomes stronger. This is what most people are living inside. Not because they're weak, not because they're broken, but because nobody ever taught them that there actually was another option. So step one is not about becoming calm. It's not about instantly choosing the perfect response. It's simply this: pause. That's it. The pause is powerful because it breaks the automatic chain. Instead of emotion leading straight to reaction, there is now space. And inside that space, something important happens. Choice becomes possible. And without the pause, there is no choice. There is only pattern. There is only habit. There is only survival. But with the pause, even if it is just for a few seconds, you create the possibility of a different outcome. Now, eventually, the goal becomes emotion, choose, intentional behaviour, better outcome. Not perfect, not emotionless, not pretending you're fine, but intentional. You feel the fear and you choose not to accuse. You feel the sadness and you choose not to isolate. You feel the anger and you choose not to punish. You feel the urge to demand certainty and you choose instead to regulate first. That is where healing starts. Not in removing the emotion, but in learning that the emotion does not have to be in charge. And I think this is where so much traditional advice misses the mark. Because people tell you to communicate better before you've learned how to regulate. They tell you to process your feelings before you even know how to identify them. They tell you to decide whether to stay or leave while your nervous system is still on fire. That isn't clarity. That's survival trying to make permanent decisions. And survival mode is not where your best decisions live. Trust me. Your best decisions come later, after the pause, after the awareness, after you've stopped treating every feeling like an emergency. And that's why I say so often, you do not need to decide your future from your worst moment. You need to understand your system first. Because once you understand the system, you stop believing every thought. You stop fearing every feeling. You stop reacting to every trigger like it's proof of danger. And slowly, you start to come back to yourself. Not the version of you that existed before betrayal, but a new version. Someone who understands themselves more deeply. Someone who can hold discomfort without collapsing into it. someone who knows that healing is not about controlling other people. It's about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. And if I'm honest, that is the real work. Not fixing the relationship, not getting the right apology, not making the perfect decision. It's becoming the kind of person who can trust themselves again. Because betrayal doesn't just damage trust in others. It damages your own instincts, your own judgment, your own sense of safety. And recovery is about rebuilding that, brick by brick, choice by choice, moment by moment. That is why the work matters. That is why the early stages matter so much. Because if you skip this part, you end up trying to solve emotional chaos with logical decisions. And that almost never works. So if you're listening to this right now and thinking, Luke, this is me, this is exactly where I am, then I want you to hear this clearly. You are not failing. You're activated. You are not weak. You are overwhelmed. And there is a difference. Because if it's a system, it can be understood. And if it can be understood, it can be changed. That is the work I do with my one-to-one clients. And it's also a huge part of what we work through inside the After the Affair Collective. Not just talking about betrayal, but learning how to actually navigate it, how to regulate, how to interrupt the spiral, how to stop betrayal becoming your identity. Because this does not have to be who you are now. It can be something that you moved through, something you learned from, something that changed you without defining you. If that sounds like the kind of support you need right now, you can find out more information at lifecoachluke.com, or you can come and join me over at Instagram at mylifecoachluke. And whether that's one-to-one coaching, the collective, or simply continuing to listen here each week, just know this: there is a way through, even if you can't see it yet. And until next time, take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon.